I'd like to call the regular meeting of the City of Post Falls Planning and Zoning Commission to order, April 12th, 2022. Will you please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we've got some new faces here, just a reminder, if you do wish to speak during public comment, go in the back, fill out the paperwork. You can turn that in up front. And again, remember to silence your cell phone. We'll go ahead and start with roll call.
Hampi.
Here.
Schlotthauer.
Here.
Davis.
Here.
Kimball.
Present.
Carey.
Here.
Stephenson.
Here.
And Ward is absent.
All right, ceremonies, announcements, appointments, and presentation. I think we've got a couple special days to recognize.
Yeah, so for this meeting, we have the National Education and Sharing Day. That's today. A little brief blurb on that. National Education and Sharing Day is observed annually on the 11th day of the month of Nisan on the Jewish calendar, or 4 days before Passover. The U.S. Congress first established National Education and Sharing Day in honor of Rabbi Menahan Mendel Schneerson, acknowledging his efforts for education and sharing for Jews and non-Jews alike. During his lifetime, the rabbi opened many centers of education. So that's what that one's about.
Very cool.
And for a little bit of fun, it's also National Licorice Day, so you guys had a little bit of snacks on your way in. So
We always
that's what that's
appreciate some
about.
licorice. Very nice. Food for thought and body. Any amendments to the agenda this evening?
None.
Okay. Declaration of conflict, ex parte contact, or site visits. Commissioners, anything to declare?
No.
Okay, hearing none, seeing none, then we'll go ahead and move on to the consent calendar.
Yeah, item A is the minutes from the March 23rd, 2022 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, and item B is the reasoned decision for the Stockwell Court Subdivision, file number SUBD 13/2021.
Okay, hopefully everybody had a chance to take a look at those. I would entertain a motion then.
I move to approve the minutes as presented.
I second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? No. Call for a vote then.
Stephenson.
Yes.
Carey.
Yes.
Kimball.
Yes.
Davis.
Yes.
Schlotthauer.
Yes.
Hampi.
Yes.
All right. Citizen issues. This section of the agenda is reserved for citizens wishing to address the commission on an issue that is not on this evening's agendas. Persons wishing to speak will have 5 minutes. Comments related to pending public hearings, including decisions that may be appealed by City Council, are out of order and should be held for that public hearing. Repeating comments regarding the same and similar topics previously addressed are also out of order, will not be allowed. Comments regarding performance by city employees, inappropriate at the time, and should be directed to the mayor by subsequent appointment. In order to ensure adequate public notice, Idaho law provides that any item other than emergencies requiring action must be placed on the agenda of an upcoming meeting. As such, the commission cannot take action on item raised during citizen issues at the same meeting, but may request additional information on that item and be placed on the future agenda. I cover that. We have some new faces. Do we have anyone wishing to share for public citizen issues? Mr. Flowers, come on up.
Bob Flowers. Good evening, folks. I got a question for the P&Z board, council, I'm not sure, commissioners. Who do you folks think that you represent? Do you represent the city of Post Falls, or do you represent the people of Post Falls? Because if you represent the people of Post Falls, I believe the people spoke loud and clear in the last election. They said what they wanted. They said the direction that they wanted to go. And I believe that that's the way it should be. Thank you.
Absolutely. And again, Mr. Flowers, that was citizen issues and comment. It wasn't Q&A, so we can discuss that at a later time. Unfinished business.
There's none.
So this takes us to the main portion of the evening, and that is public hearing. So we'll go ahead again. If you wish to comment for those, make sure that you sign up and turn them in. We will go ahead and get things started with the first one, zoning recommendation for Wellspring annexation.
All right. Good evening, Commissioners. Laura Jones, Associate Planner with the City of Post Falls, introducing you to the Wellspring Annexation and Subdivision. The property owner and applicant is Fivefold Foundation Ministries Incorporated, and the consultant is Bart North with North Engineering. You have two requested actions tonight. The first is the annexation to provide recommendation to the City Council for the zoning designation of medium-density residential R2 and limited commercial on approximately 9 acres as part of an annexation request into the City of Post Falls. Your second action is a request for approval to subdivide approximately 9 acres into 24 lots. Of those, 23 will have a zoning designation of medium-density residential R2, and 1 lot will have a zoning designation of limited commercial, contingent on your recommendation of these zoning designations and annexation approval from the City Council. The subject property is located on the southeast corner of Prairie Avenue and North Greens Ferry Road, as indicated on the vicinity map in red. The current land use is vacant. Natural characteristics or features is the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer. The water provider is Ross Point Water District, and the City of Post Falls will provide wastewater services. Looking at the surrounding zoning, to the north is unincorporated Kootenai County properties. They're 5-acre lots with single-family homes. To the east is Green Meadows Second Edition. It's zoned R2, single-family, and built out with single-family homes. To the south is Green Meadows R1, single-family homes. And to the west is the commercial property, which was annexed last year, the Gondo annexation, and 2 5-acre residential properties in Kootenai County. Looking at the zone change review criteria, the first is that amendments to the zoning map should be in accordance with the future land use map. The future land use designation is transitional, and this is designated to land suitable for growth. However, timing is undetermined, and guidance for proposed growth can be located within the focused area. It's also located within a commercial activity node. You can see it there in the black hatch pattern. And commercial nodes are intended to encourage commercial activities at major transportation nodes to complement the overall community. Nodes would consist of a variety of retail, office, and other commercial services to be integrated into the nearby community with the intent to create a focal point of vibrancy conveniently located near neighborhoods and other commercial services. Looking at the focused area, it's within the 41 North focus area. And this area is developing with land values that pressure development and should attract a range of residents offering shared amenities, housing variety, and neighborhood scale services. And key policies that should guide this development is that provisions for multifamily, commercial, and tech uses should be near higher classified roadways, and they should focus provisions for commercial uses along arterial collector streets where traffic volumes exceed 4,000 vehicle trips per day. The second review criteria is that amendments to the zoning map should be in accordance with the goals and policies outlined in the Post Falls Comprehensive Plan. There's several goals and policies. I'm not going to go into them in detail. They're outlined very extensively in the staff report on this one. There are quite a few that could be applicable. Policies, I'm going to focus on policy 2 as it focuses more on infrastructure and compatibility with surrounding land uses and also the traffic patterns. So looking at the infrastructure, as mentioned, the City of Post Falls will provide water reclamation services, and Ross Point will provide water, and they did provide a will serve letter. Again, more policies that may be applicable and were outlined in the staff report. I'm just putting these up here to kind of give an overview of some of the more prominent ones that were listed. Zone review criteria C is that zoning is assigned following consideration of such items as street classification, traffic patterns, existing development, future land uses, community plans, and geographic or natural features. Again, this is situated over the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer. Commercial and high-density residential zoning is typically assigned along streets with a higher road classification. This goes back to policy 2 that I mentioned, street classification and traffic patterns. Prairie Avenue Prairie Avenue is a principal arterial, and Greens Ferry Road is a minor arterial. And with these road classifications, annexation of this site with these zoning densities should not adversely impact traffic. Looking at the next review criteria is that limited or neighborhood commercial and lower density residential is typically assigned for properties as they proceed further away from the higher intensity urban activities. On this map, you can see the dark red along Mullen and Saltese are the higher intensity urban activities, as with Highway 41. The pink is developing urban, high intensity urban activity areas. Our site is up here, and you can see this site is just starting to develop with commercial activity. However, it is limited commercial activity and more of that residential scale commercial. Lastly is that industrial zoning is typically assigned for properties with sufficient access to major transportation routes and may be situated away from residential zoning. As you can see on the zoning map, they're not located around any other industrial properties, and they're not asking for industrial, therefore it is not applicable. Moving on to the subdivision portion of the request, 24 lots. Lot 1, highlighted in red, is the proposed limited commercial area. The remainder of the 23 lots are proposed as residential, R2 medium density residential. The overall density for the whole site, including the limited commercial property, is 2.6 units per acre. If you take that out and focus just on the residential portion, it equates to 3.7 units per acre. Looking at the review criteria, the first is that definite provision has been made for water supply systems and that it is adequate in terms of quantity and quality for the type of subdivision. Again, Ross Point supplied a will serve letter, and they said that it is sufficient and they have the capacity and willingness to serve the site. Looking at the next is dealing with wastewater. City of Post Falls is the wastewater provider, and again, the city has the capacity and willingness to serve the site, and the proposal is in conformance with the city's water reclamation master plan. Review criteria 3 is that proposed streets are consistent with the transportation element of the comprehensive plan. We covered this in the annexation, principal arterial for Prairie Avenue and a minor arterial for Greens Ferry. And again, they should not adversely impact the existing transportation system. And there will also be there will be no access to Prairie Avenue or Greens Ferry from the residential lots. The next review criteria is that all areas of the proposed subdivision which may involve soil or topographical conditions presenting hazards have been identified, and that the proposed uses of these areas are compatible with such conditions. Again, as previously mentioned, it's located over the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer. However, there are no known soil conditions or topographical conditions that might be a hazard for the site. The next review criteria is that the area proposed for subdivision is zoned for the proposed uses, and the uses conform to the requirements found in this code. The subdivision approval is contingent on the annexation of City Council, and the subdivision for proposed lots conform to the requirements of Title 17, which is the subdivision ordinance, and Title 18, which is our zoning ordinance. And as you can see on the bulk emplacement table, the lot sizes proposed are consistent with the bulk emplacement. The last the last subdivision review criteria is that the developer has made adequate plans to ensure the community will bear no more than its fair share of cost to provide services by paying fees, furnishing land, or providing other mitigation measures for off-site impacts to streets, parks, and other public facilities within the community. It is the expectation that in most cases, off-site mitigation will be dealt with through the obligation to pay development impact fees. These impact fees and cap fees will be assessed and collected on individual building permits, and assist in mitigating those off-site improvements to parks, public safety, streets, city water, and water reclamation. This is the list of agencies that were routed for both the annexation and the subdivision. Of those, Kootenai County Fire and Rescue stated that they will reserve comments for the permitting process. Post Falls Police were neutral. The Post Falls Highway District is requesting that there be no direct access onto Prairie. That's something that's standard on most subdivisions and reviewed by our engineering department. The next is the annexation of all of the right-of-way on Prairie Avenue, or excuse me, that all of the right-of-way will be annexed on Prairie Avenue. That will be a condition we will place on the annexation when it goes before City Council, since you're only making recommendation on the zoning tonight. And the last for the Highway District is that the City of Post Falls take ownership of the signals at Prairie and Greens Ferry. That's something that's common practice that we do with most annexations. And then the Department of Environmental Quality had no comments. And with that, I can take questions on either of the requests.
How large is the, is lot number 1?
I believe it was 2.9 acres. Let me get back to it though.
Yeah.
2.966
Okay.
acres.
As a commercial use, where would access be? Would it be off of Greens Ferry, or would it be restricted to coming in and out on Prairie?
I believe it would be coming in off this private road, but maybe I'll have Rob Paulus come up and comment on that.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Robert Paulus, Assistant City Engineer. With that site, if it was zoned for the limited commercial and then developed as such, there'd be a number of different options as to how access could come to that site. Principally, we would most likely see a commercial access on and off of Greens Ferry Road. We could also see the development of a secondary access from the roadway on the south side. There is the potential, we know that Post Falls Highway District has asked for no access onto Prairie Avenue. There is a critical arterial corridor policy which restricts any new access points onto Prairie Avenue. That would be controlled. That would mean like a roundabout or a traffic signal at the half-mile spacing. The city policy also allows for a quarter-mile access, but that would be a restricted access for roadways. And depending upon what the use was, there could be the value of having a right in, right out, which is the most we would possibly see from an access onto Prairie Avenue. That would be something that may have a fairly distributed access coming in, a business that people filter in, but then they all leave at about the same time. A right in, right out could be helpful for a location like that because it would not overwhelm the traffic signal as much. But it's something that we would look at depending upon what the actual commercial use is and then weighing it against our standards as to what is the best access and not to mess up the regional priorities of Prairie Avenue or how the arterial works on Greens Ferry.
A question then on Greens Ferry, if that's used as an entrance exit, would it have to be upgraded some because it's not that wide there?
Correct. So with the subdivision, they would be widening Greens Ferry to meet our standards from Prairie Avenue down, well, along their entire frontage, which would tie into what the Green Meadow subdivision has done for widening to the south.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Rob, would they also be widening Prairie Avenue?
So with Prairie Avenue is listed in the city's transportation master plan as a principal arterial, and it's also listed in our capital improvement plan as an impact fee project. So the widening of Prairie Avenue itself, the curb, gutter, asphalt widening, that would be something that would be covered by impact fees as a project in the future.
Okay.
The alternative to that would be we would have them build it and then we would have to reimburse them for the costs of that widening from our impact fee dollars. One of the problems with that immediately is that depending on how we widen out Prairie Avenue, we have a traffic signal that needs to be adjusted in location as well, and that's a fairly high cost item to move a traffic signal pole.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I would like to add a comment for clarity and transparency.
Mm-hmm.
That residential units per acre, that's, if you go lots per acre, that would be correct. There's a range, because zoning allows different types of products. When you look at zoning, you have vested rights. So the applicant is desiring to put single-family homes, and so that would be 3.7. But any lot that's greater than 7,200 square feet, you could put a duplex in per code. And so there's a range actually from about 3.7 to 7.4 approximately, depending on, and that's the difference between like an R1 and an R2. You get that diversity and potential density.
Okay. So the maximum overall density would be 5.2, based on the entire.
Yes,
size.
based off the whole 5.1 is what I calculated, but yeah, 5.2.
Okay.
And you can see there like lots 3 and 4, they're under 7,200. It looks like they're like 71 something. So those you couldn't put a duplex on if that was the ultimate. Could be not being able to read it, but.
Yeah, 3 and 4 are just under 7,200.
Quite a few of these are listed as duplex lot on this one map.
Yeah, I believe there's 4 on the south end. Lots 24, 23, 22, and 21 are listed as duplex.
It doesn't change
Regardless,
the
it's- yeah.
staff report. It doesn't change the analysis or anything. I just wanted to be transparent on the density though on the request with R2.
Yeah. Regardless, it's R2 zoning.
Any other questions for staff? None?
None.
No.
Okay, we'll invite the applicant up.
1, 2, 3, 4, 2.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Bart North Engineering. I reside at 1700 East Jabra Avenue in Coeur d'Alene. And I'm speaking to you tonight as the applicant's representative. I want to thank you for the opportunity to come present this annexation and subdivision proposal to you this evening. I also want to thank staff for doing such a fine job on the staff report. The applicant, Pastor John DeVries, is here in the audience this evening, and we have reviewed the staff report and take no exception to any of its findings. There's really, like I said, staff has done such an exhaustive job on the staff report. There's not much to add to it, but I thought it might be useful to give you a little background on how we got here to this evening. In about 2006, Pastor John DeVries, with the support of his congregation, purchased this particular parcel with the intent of constructing the Wellsprings of Life Christian Fellowship, which is a fivefold ministry, full gospel church and training center. At that time, of course, the parcel was in Kootenai County, and in 2006, Pastor John submitted a conditional use permit. It was given the designation C-1132-05 to Kootenai County, and over the course of 2006, the conditional use permit was processed and was actually issued and approved and issued in January 2007. Just as Pastor John was moving forward with the project, of course, the 2008 housing bubble burst, and in the ensuing recession, he was unable to proceed with the project. And from 2008 to present, it's been a process of recovery. And in 2020, the Fivefold Foundation Ministries had obtained ownership of this parcel and was ready to move forward with the project. In a pre-application meeting with Kootenai County, it was discovered that in the lapse of time that the city boundary had annexed right up to his parcel, and that city services were essentially parked right at the southwest corner of the property. That pretty much ended the discussion with Kootenai County about reapplying for a conditional use permit, and it was determined that annexation was the only course of action by which the project could proceed. And essentially, that's what brings us to this hearing tonight. In contemplation of annexation, as you can see, this lot is it's peculiar in the sense that it has what's called double frontage. The cost of extending infrastructure to city standards for annexation is substantial. The intent is the same, to construct a church facility on the parcel, but in order to fund the improvements required for annexation, Fivefold Ministries found the need to propose the subdivision that you're being presented with this evening. The limited commercial, a 3-acre limited commercial lot is the lot upon which the church is proposed to be constructed. And as it was stated, the proposed subdivision is an R2 zone. All but 4 of the lots are proposed to be single-family detached residential, and as Laura pointed out, the 4 lots that are in the southwest corner are proposed to be duplex lots. As it regards access to the limited commercial, it is correct that there's a potential approach onto the residential access. It is likely, although no specific plan has been submitted to date and will probably be evaluated at the time of submittal, that a restricted access onto Greens Ferry Road and Prairie Avenue would be proposed. In fact, we submitted the application with that proposal. As Rob pointed out, it appears to be consistent with the critical arterial access policy, in that the approaches would be right in, right out, and would not, with the absence of left turning movements, should not affect the flow of traffic as severely. With that, I would yield up any of my time remaining to answer any questions or provide any comments that may come up as further in the hearing.
Questions for applicant?
Yeah, in our packet here, the concept development plan, it looks like the commercial lot is split in 2, phase 1 and future phases. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Is that the plan, or has that changed?
I think that was a conceptual drawing, and yes, the church, we've been working on a preliminary site plan that would place the church on the southerly half of the commercial lot. And that's what the phase 1 and phase 2 is about. But as we stand here before you this evening, we are asking for a use on that limited commercial parcel, lot 1, that would be consistent with LC zone, whatever that turns into.
Mm-hmm. And then, so obviously you request R2 to have the duplexes in there, but why 4 duplexes and all the other lots R1, or single family basically?
Applicant preference. I think there's it lends itself to single family, which is the intent is to construct the bulk of it as single family detached residential units.
Other questions? Not at this time? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, just to kind of run through how this works, just in case anyone is unsure with our public hearings, we allow staff to give their report, the applicant will come up and share, and then we have public comment. At that time afterwards, applicant will then be able to come back up and share thoughts before we close things out. So with that being said, public comment in favor,
None.
neutral,
None.
opposed. Okay. Okay, in opposition, not wishing to speak, Tammy Godfrey. Stop building until our infrastructure is addressed. Better roads, police, fire, school, food, stores, etc. It seems that Post Falls has caught up to the overwhelming amount of people coming into the city. The people of Post Falls can't even afford housing costs. Let's address the needs of our city first, then continue to build infrastructure first. Okay, thank you, Tammy. Any others regarding this hearing? Okay. Applicant, anything else to add? If so, come up so we can have it into the record.
Well, I guess in response to that, to the comment, I would point out that this project widens, contributes to the infrastructure development in the city, in that we're widening Greens Ferry Road. As Rob had stated, the Prairie Avenue widening is going to be, the applicant will be contributing either by impact fees and/or there's some portion that would be possibly constructed. We haven't gone that far into the discussion to know. But certainly the extension of the 12-inch water main for Ross Point Water District is a substantial extension of infrastructure. Also, the LC zone on this particular lot opens the possibility for neighborhood commercial services. And so I would say, in rebuttal to the comment, that the opposition is that this project addresses all those. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any further comment?
Do you?
I have a question for staff.
Please.
So on the condition, the subdivision conditions, it's when you get down to number 9, then there's number 4, which is, so is it just supposed to be 1 through 10? Did you look at the condition, if you look at the subdivision conditions, I think it should be 1 through 10. That's
Yeah.
correct, right? It just, the 4 is just, okay, yep.
Other questions?
Actually, I do now.
Yes.
What's and this is probably for the applicant, what's the timing of everything? If everything goes through and gets approved, what are you guys thinking?
As soon as possible. No, the intent would be to have plat recordation occur in 2022.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, thoughts?
I haven't seen one of these come through where it's the annexation and subdivision coming through sequentially like this. Is this common or new?
It's not unusual.
Okay. It seems
It's just when we do,
efficient.
when we do the subdivision, as you see, we just condition the subdivision upon ultimate determination by the city council on the annexation.
Sure.
Any other questions for staff, applicant, legal, road, anything else? Okay. We'll go ahead, close the hearing. I would share this because I know the question was asked as far as our representation. I want to stress again that we are volunteers. So we're appointed volunteers who are not elected by citizens, but rather appointed by the mayor, approved by council to terms And we have a process that we're required to follow that does not include side conversations, site visits, emotions, or opinions. With this, we are simply making a recommendation that if council was to annex, our recommendation for annexation would be X. And also reviewing the subdivision file, there are 6 criteria in which we are required to follow. So we'll actually go through those right now. You want to pull it up? Perfect. Review criteria and approval criteria. Definite provisions have been made for water supply system that is adequate in terms of quantity and quality for the type of subdivision proposed.
Mr. Chairman, I think we're gonna do the zone change first.
Oh, well, let's go with the zone change, or
Or
zone recommendation
Zone recommendation, yeah.
then let's go with amendments to the zoning map should be in accordance with the comprehensive plan's future land use map. I was a little ahead of myself there.
You were.
Comprehensive plan, future land use map, does it fit? Thoughts, comments, concerns? James?
Well, it's in the transitional area. I mean, the zoning that they're requesting is right next to other property that has the same exact zoning. So that makes sense in that sense.
Yeah, what better transition could you have than the same use of the neighboring properties and then transition to commercial on the corner next to commercial on the corner? It's about as straightforward as it can be.
I think one of the key points is that in the comprehensive plan, we've got these nodes at certain intersections, and those were commercial places where we thought that, you know, commercial would be appropriate in those vicinities, higher intensity uses, and I think this follows that exactly to the intent of the comprehensive plan for those specific places.
Nancy, Vicky, anything to add?
No, nothing to add.
I'd prefer to see a little more commercial in the commercial node.
Fair.
I mean, this parcel, it's over 9 acres and a third or less is actually for commercial and the rest of it is for residential. So, I mean, it doesn't really scream just commercial. So, I personally would like to see it developed as more what the intent of the commercial node is, commercial.
Okay. Anything else to add?
I would add a corollary to that, that I agree that I definitely want to see some commercial there. And glad to see that the corner is taken up by commercial. It's definitely what the comprehensive plan had in mind. But also, as far as our representation, I think we represent individuals and their property rights and their right to do with their property what they want to do, provided it meets the comprehensive plan. And so that's who I think we represent here, more so than a vocal minority.
Okay. Anything else on this? Okay, let's move on to number 2. Amendments to the zoning map should be in accordance with the goals and policies found in the Post Falls Comprehensive Plan. I believe we just discussed that.
We covered
Anything
that.
further to discuss there?
I think staff discussed that really well in the staff report.
Well covered. Anything else? Okay, let's move on to number 3. Zoning is assigned the following considerations of such items as street classification, traffic patterns, existing development, future land use, community plans, geography and natural features. Encourages a balance of land use to help Post Falls remain desirable, stable, sustainable community. In regards to number 3, thoughts?
I think that's pretty much been covered too. It's,
Right.
you know, the commercial use there is consideration of the classification of those streets, Prairie and Greens Ferry.
I think Nancy brings up a good point. I think it's also important to think about what's an appropriate type of commercial use at a corner like that. So the Highway 41 was a huge commercial corridor. It's a mile away. If people are going to get into their cars and go somewhere to a commercial corridor, that's probably where they're going to go. And neighborhood commercial would be probably the kind of thing where there's enough houses in that vicinity for someone to walk to a little C-store, which is kind of what that limited commercial is for, is have that be the appropriate zoning for that kind of thing. And when you look at the size of that type of a use for a limited commercial, like a little office building or a little commercial kind of thing, 10 acres is definitely overkill for something like that. That's kind of like, that's the kind of thing you see like a grocery store go on. But that's the kind of thing, that's a destination commercial kind of thing where people get in their cars and go. And with the development pattern being what it is out there, and it's kind of a cut off little chunk, a 10-acre chunk, I do think that the limited commercial zone right there on that 3 acres is probably about the right size.
The word that sticks out to me in this criteria is balance, and
Mm-hmm.
I think the applicant has created a balance there that's reasonable.
Very good. Anything else? Okay, let's move on to number 4. Commercial and high-density residential zoning is typically assigned along streets with higher road classification. Anything here that we need to cover? Thoughts or concerns?
I think the fact that there's 2 arterials and it's a little limited commercial at that corner covers that.
Anything else, James?
It's not, I wouldn't call it per se high density, it's medium,
Mhm.
but you do have the capacity on Prairie and Greens Ferry for that type of zoning.
Let's go to number 5. Limit or neighborhood commercial and lower density residential zoning is assigned to properties, typically assigned to properties that proceed further away from higher intense urban activity. Ensure that adequate land is available for future housing needs. Anything to discuss on this matter?
This is definitely away from the, this is on the edge of town. Lots of, it's a lot of, 9 acres, 9.17 acres. So,
I don't think it's gonna be the edge of town much longer, though.
Well, true.
That's kind of a, I think it's, low-density residential, which is a lot of what is in there, it's really not what this is describing, is it? It's lower density residential is typically assigned for properties as they proceed farther away from higher intensity urban activity, and this is a commercial node. That's what it's been kind of designated for, a commercial node. So anyhow, it's just back to the same thing that I said I would like to see more commercial and there are less residential. So.
Okay. Number 6. Industrial zoning is typically assigned for properties with sufficient access to major transportation routes situated from a residential zoning. Obviously, nothing to add here.
Not really applicable.
Nope.
not applicable.
Okay. Feel, do we need to make a recommendation for zoning and then move on to the next criteria, or do you want to go both?
That would probably be appropriate.
Okay.
That way we close out that aspect and then we can consider the subdivision review criteria.
Okay, perfect. With covering criteria for a zoning recommendation, I think we've covered everything. If there's no other dialogue between commissioners, we would entertain a motion.
I would move to recommend the zoning as presented by the applicant of limited commercial and R2 zoning, finding that it meets the criteria as discussed, and our reasonings. And I guess we'd be directing, is there staff direction for a, so.
A zoning
and-
recommendation to the city council.
So just recommendation to city council for that, so. Yeah, that's it.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Nope. Call for a vote on zoning recommendation.
Stephenson,
No.
Carey,
Yes.
Kimball,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Schlauer,
Yes.
Hamby.
No.
Okay. Forwarded on to council for approval. And then let's go ahead and jump into our criteria that I already tried to jump into for subdivision. Number one, definite provision has been made for water supply system that is adequate in terms of quantity and quality, type of subdivision proposed. Lots of words there. I know we were talking about that earlier. Should we go back to it?
Ross Point Water District has provided a will serve letter, and it sounds like the applicant will be putting in water mains on Prairie Avenue and Greens Ferry to complete that part of the water system, so it looks like they've met that requirement.
Seems well covered. Anything else to add? No? We'll go to number two. Adequate provisions have been made for public sewage systems and that the existing municipal system can accommodate proposed sewer flows. Anything that jumped out of concern or
Well, staff
thoughts?
reported that the city of Post Falls, and they have capacity to handle it, so.
Yeah, I feel like staff does a good job covering that. Let's move to number three. Proposed streets are consistent with transportation element of the comprehensive plan.
I think that was pretty well covered by Rob, that they get the opportunity to build two really expensive chunks of street, or at least contribute to that. So two arterials. So that's all consistent with the Transportation Master Plan.
Nancy?
I
I saw some hesitancy, that's why I called on you.
Well, it's kind of the same thing that I brought up before. I just think that, again, low-density residential, that probably isn't the best fit, in my opinion, even for the classifications of streets. It kind of all goes hand in hand, I think.
Okay. Anything else?
I think this is where my concern is, just, I think to me, there's too many questions on how it's gonna look. You get a church, depending on how big, you have a lot of traffic going in and out of there, and then what commercial are you gonna put in there, and how's that gonna look? And then you got the residential right there. So, that was where I was coming from.
I don't really see the difference if it was a 10-acre Walmart that went in there. You're still gonna have a commercial user on the corner and residential adjacent. Or if you shrink it down to, and I don't think that the property's ever gonna be used in that location for that type of a use, so shrinking it down a little bit more, like Ray indicated, just seems reasonable. You're still gonna have, in the node like that, you're going to have commercial adjacent to transitioning to residential. It's just, that's how it's been designed.
Yeah, I think this is the opposite of what we see when it comes to concerns about a development project putting undue pressure on our transportation. They're actually at the corner of two arterials with a traffic signal, and they're proposing less intensive uses than what could be there under a CCS, commercial, high-use commercial node. So, and it's, the Transportation Master Plan is pretty specific that those two streets, Greens Ferry and Prairie, are arterials, have to be built to that standard. And so, and the local street is to local street standard. So, all of those things are consistent with the transportation element in the comprehensive plan. I mean, the Transportation Master Plan is part of the comprehensive plan. I think that's, and we haven't heard any testimony from any engineers to say that there's any problems with any transportation elements in the area. I'm sure that traffic signal is operating at a level of service of A or B or better, probably A. And a church doesn't operate during peak hours. So, I mean, they're not,
Your transportation issues are gonna be Wednesday evening, Sunday morning.
right. Right, not Thursday at 8 AM or 7:30. So,
Other thoughts? No? Let's move on to number 4. All areas of the proposed subdivision which involve soil or topographical conditions presenting hazards have been identified, and proposed uses of these areas are compatible with such conditions. I would say that, I actually thought about this earlier, in the last several dozen of our public hearings, this is where 2 different times this policy has jumped in, or this process has jumped in and worked, to where we've found mysterious landfills and things of that nature, but I think everything has been covered here. Any thoughts?
Agree, I agree.
Agree.
Okay. Number 5, the area proposed in the subdivision zone for the proposed uses, and the uses conform to other requirements found in this code.
Maybe.
Go on.
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
As,
I think
as conditioned.
yeah, I think
As
as
conditioned.
I think as conditioned, everything meets the requirements of the zoning ordinance if it's zoned.
As recommended?
Yeah.
As recommended, yeah.
Right.
If
Anything
if
else?
it passes.
The developers made adequate plans to ensure that the community will bear no more than its fair share of costs to provide services by paying fees, furnishing land, or providing mitigation measures for off-site impacts to streets, parks, and other public facilities in the community. It is the expectation that in most cases, off-site mitigation will be dealt with through obligations to pay development impact fees. This is always a concern. Any comments there?
Well, we are an impact fee city, and so any development does pay impact fees for parks and streets and pedestrian facilities and yeah, and so also police and maybe soon even EMS and fire. So I think the impact fees definitely make sure that the developer pays their fair share, and I think that's as well as building infrastructure. So I think the city is set up very well to make sure that development pays for development.
And I am repeatedly on the opposite side on this from most people, but my belief is that we probably go a little overboard on fair share. And for instance, if it was just the church developing just the corner, I doubt they could possibly pull off the fees and the infrastructure requirements. So adding the residential buffer around the property probably helps them to pull the whole project off.
Okay, anything else to add? All right. With that being said, unless there's any other comment, we'll look for a motion regarding the subdivision.
I would move to recommend approval of the Wellsprings Addition subdivision, finding it has met the criteria 1 through 6 as discussed, and adopting the conditions found in the staff report 1 through 9 plus 4. And that's it.
I'll second it.
It's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Nope, call for a vote.
Hampi,
No.
Schlauhauer,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Kimball,
Yes.
Carey,
Yes.
Stephenson.
No.
Okay, public hearing number 2. We will go ahead and open the Morris Annexation zoning recommendation.
Good evening, Commissioners. John Manley, Planning Manager, presenting the Morris Annexation and the zoning recommendation accordingly, file number ANX 13-2021. So the applicant is Gordon Dobler of Dobler Engineering, representing Harlan Douglas. What they're asking is a recommendation forwarded to City Council for the CCS zoning district to support their 12-acre annexation request. The 12 acres is, as you see here, hatched in red, just north of Prairie, on the northwest corner of Highway 40 and Highway 41 and Prairie Avenue there. Currently, it's ag land in the county. There's no significant topology or vegetation matters. To acknowledge, though, it is over the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer. Ross Point Water District would be the water provider, and that's referenced in Exhibit A9 in your staff report. And City of Post Falls would be providing a sewer service. So looking at annexations and the zone criteria, similar to the last hearing, I got the first three here, and they we'll go into the next slides that address these, but the first one is zoning map. The amendments to the zoning map should be in accordance with the comprehensive plan's future land use map. Also, amendments need to be consistent with the goals and policies found in the comprehensive plan. Zoning is also assigned considering items of street classification, traffic patterns, existing development, future land uses, community plans, and other geographic or natural features. So looking at the surrounding zoning that you have in the area, pretty much all the land that abut this in the city is zone CCS, hence the request to zone this CCS as it is deemed consistent with the adjacent uses. You do have off to the west a technology mixed zoning district. South of Prairie, you got some R1 zoning and a PUD, some other R1, the yellow. You have a community commercial mix, that's that yellow and red striped. And then you have, for the most part, up along 41, a band of community commercial services from about the Highway 41 interchange up to this point. So CCS is a common zoning district along 41. Looking at the future land use map, you got the pink area, that's that business commercial, and community commercial services is an implementing zoning district. And then you have some lighter yellow here, some low density residential about that location just west of Charville, south of Prairie. You got commercial there in the red. And then you have a little bit of medium density over there also in the Foxtail. So the purpose of the business commercial is to provide a wide variety of general service, retail, professional office, light industrial, artisan manufacturing, and mixed uses that serve the local and regional residents as well as the traveling public. One may deduce that that location on Prairie and 41 could serve that purpose. There you see that implementing zoning district, CCS, bolded. 41 North, the way the comp plan's set up is you have your future land use map, and then you have these little sub areas that kind of provide some further guidance. You can see here that there's a provision to focus multifamily, commercial, and tech uses near higher classified roadways. I would say that 41 would meet that. Also, development should provide pedestrian connectivity to all multi-use paths, trails, including the Prairie Trail. So you have the future Prairie Trail running right along here. How far westerly it goes, who knows? We do know that it will get to the west side of 41 sometime. So all that development you see along there would provide connections to that Prairie Trail. So whether you're commercial or residential, that development would be able to be connected through that system. Looking at some of the goals here, grow and sustain a balanced, resilient economy for Post Falls, providing community prosperity and fiscal health. Goal 3, maintain and improve Post Falls small town scale, charm, and aesthetic beauty. Goal 5, keep Post Falls neighborhoods safe, vital, and attractive. Got Goal 7, plan for and establish the quantity types of land uses in Post Falls, supporting community needs and city's long-term sustainability. Goal 8, maintain, protect natural resources, clean air, soil, river, and aquifer. Goal 12, maintain the City of Post Falls long-term fiscal health. Then you have policies that go into support land use patterns that do those. Staff report kind of goes into more detail of how it may or may not meet these elements. Apply or revise zoning designations with careful consideration of those following factors. I've kind of gone into most of that. Future land use mapping, compatibility with surrounding land uses, infrastructure and service plans, existing future traffic patterns, goals and policies in the comprehensive plan. And you can see in the staff report the discussion about the compatibility of proposed commercial and how it relates to those higher classified roadways. Kind of already touched base on this. Encourage patterns to provide suitably scaled daily needs to surface within walking distance of residential areas. And there highlighted in green, that's that prairie trail system that's, you know, going from there to the residences to the southeast, as well as 41 is going to be providing a north-south multi-use trail along it. Encourage the development of off-corridor access circulation for commercial and mixed uses areas abutting limited access arterials. So the arterials around there would assist that, as well as Charville. Looking at the fourth criteria, commercial and high-density residential zoning is typically assigned along streets with higher road classifications. I already mentioned Highway 41, and they're proposing commercial outside of an interstate. I don't know if you get much more higher classified than this. Limited or neighborhood commercial. It's really not too applicable since we're not proceeding further away from a high-intense urban core area. 41 is pretty much a commercial corridor. Industrial, that's this criteria 6 really isn't applicable. These are the agencies that were routed. Here's the comments that were received. You can see the comment from Kootenai County Fire and Rescue. They just consistently say they're in partnership with us. Oftentimes their comments get incorporated at the time of subdivision and or site plan development. Police department remained neutral. Highway district had no comment. And the PA4 is Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ. They said that there was no environmental impacts at this stage. Any questions for me at this time with this request for CCS?
I have a quick question with regards to the commercial mix and technology mix. Do you remember offhand what the minimum property size is for those zones?
20 acres.
So those would be off the table for this application because it's only 12.
For the, actually the CCM might have been 4. I know the technology mix is 20 acres, but CCM I believe is 4.
Okay, so they couldn't do a technology mixed.
Couldn't do the technology mixed. So
Okay.
the applicant may be able to answer why they would chose the CCS versus going down a CCM route.
Any other questions for staff? Nope. Nope. Okay, thank you very much. Invite the applicant up.
Left my extensive PowerPoint back in the office.
Okay.
Just an overall. No, back. You just passed it. Ready, set, there.
You want
Good enough.
that?
Yep, sure, good enough.
Okay.
Gordon Dobler, Dobler Engineering. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I don't have a lot to add, but I do want to point out a few things. So I can answer one question, why the CCS versus CC&M. Well, this property is owned by the abutting property owner, Douglas, that owns the whole tech park, which is CC&S. So their intent is to fold it into the tech park with the same kind of land uses as in the tech park. That's the whole point of this, really. In fact, it almost needs to be integral in the tech park because I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but that's where all of the transportation and infrastructure is coming from, would have to come through the tech park. So let's jump back to the zone. surrounded by CCS. Across the street is CCS. This is being developed by GVD Properties as commercial center. You know, this is all tech park. And in fact, we've already had a pre-app with staff on platting this whole tech park piece. And while you're not particularly privileged to it at this meeting, the plan is they're going to extend Charlottesville up, and then streets would access, this parcel would be accessed from the backside. In fact, there's some verbiage in the development agreement that it says when that happens, access to 41 would be eliminated. So again, the intent is to integrate this with the surrounding tech park. Therefore, the zoning, we feel that zoning is consistent, certainly with the surrounding zonings and with the tech park zoning. Access, again, ultimately will come from the tech park. Right now, there is an access off of 41 that's being constructed with the 41 project. But again, in the development agreement, that access will go away when future access is provided. And again, that'll come through the tech park to the backside, and that's where this lot will be served from. We have 41, but again, ultimately, it won't access 41 directly. But the CCNS we feel is appropriate up against 41 because of, you've heard it from staff and zoning. It conforms to the Highway 41 plan, et cetera. Water is Ross Point. You have a letter in your packet, a will serve letter. Realistically, this development is actually bringing water across the freeway in a sleeve just a smidge north of this property, but it'll come up into the tech park over here. So theoretically, it would have access to water as soon as these improvements are constructed this summer. Ultimately, though, it would be coming up Charlottesville again, and from the backside, that's where water is going to come from. Sewer is going to come from the west side up through the tech park. And you've got a statement from staff saying, yeah, that the city is willing and able to provide sewer. That covers the facilities. Pedestrian access, interesting. When we did our pre-app with staff, even though this piece hasn't been annexed, there was some anticipation of that happening, and with the subdivision of the tech park, there was I'll say it's a requirement, but at least an indication that there would be a requirement to extend a multi-use path down 41. So, as well as development of the Prairie Trail along the tracks if and when they're vacated on the site of 41. So we've got pedestrian connectivity on all those points for the project. And I think in short that pretty much covers the points that staff hasn't. So there you have it.
Questions? Nothing for applicant? Okay,
Is that?
I think we're good. Thank you, sir. Public comment. Those in favor?
None.
Those neutral?
None.
Those opposed?
One.
Okay. In opposition, wishing to speak on the Morris annexation, Mr. Flowers, come on up, sir.
Bob Flowers. I don't really object to this piece. I mean, it's a logical annexation. What I object to is the CCS zoning and all these mentions of high density, in other words, what's allowed in a CCS zone. And I have this really bad feeling that if this piece of property gets annexed in and gets that zoning designation, what guarantees do we have that it's just not gonna become a giant apartment complex? They're gonna say they need it for employees of the tech district or whatever. In other words, we've seen it 1,000 times. Or not, maybe not 1,000, but we've seen CCS suddenly go into high-density apartments. And I think before you grant them what they're asking for, you should get some assurances and something in writing that that's not what's gonna happen with this piece of property. Because dumping a bunch more apartments along 41, especially right now, is just, it's crazy. 41, once everything is developed that's already been approved along 41, it's already gonna be full. By the time everything's built out that's been approved, with all these improvements on 41, we've already overloaded it. And I think before you jump into this, you should get some assurances from the developer or the owner or both. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flowers. Mr. Manley, can that be controlled because that would have to take a special use permit, correct?
Yeah, I got a couple comments on that.
Okay.
So the CCS, in order to do multifamily in it, you need to do a special use permit, which
Okay.
is a separate public hearing that goes before the Planning and Zoning Commission. That being said, that's why we have actually what the issue that culminated the creation of some of our mixed zoning districts, because it creates a container of control. So with a mixed zoning district, you have a development agreement, and in that, it allows a measure for the body to add caps or remove certain elements that would otherwise be permitted. So so there's two avenues with that. So with this, though, the CCS, you would do the special use permit, which would be a separate public hearing.
Right. Okay. Does the applicant wish to come up and address anything else? Okay, covered. Questions?
I just want to clarify then, so the multifamily is not a use in the CCNS without special use?
Yeah, it's not a permitted outright use.
Yeah.
It's only allowed through a special use
Special
permit.
use, okay.
Yeah, so in order for them to come in and try to do anything, they would have to come
back
through us
to us.
again
Okay.
through a special use permit. Okay.
That's any residential, right?
Oh, that's a,
Duplexes, townhomes, anything.
Yeah, you couldn't do single family,
Right.
but yeah, duplex, anything more than a single family, you could get asked for the special use permit.
okay. Okay. Duly noted. All right. Let's run through the zone change criteria. Number one, amendments to the zoning map should be in accordance with comprehensive plan, future land use map. Do we agree?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Right along that commercial corridor.
Right, fits the surrounding.
Yep.
Okay. Number two, amendments to the zoning map should be in accordance with the goals and policies found in the Post Falls Comprehensive Plan. I believe 1 and 2 go hand in hand.
Yes.
Agreed.
Yep. Anything to add? Okay. Number three, zoning is assigned following consideration of such items as street classification, traffic patterns, existing development, future land uses, community plans, geographic or natural features, encourages a balance of land use to help Post Falls remain desirable, stable, and a sustainable community.
I think the CCS zone is gonna fill a hole, so it's a little donut hole there, so it's hoping to fill that little donut hole in. And with regards to traffic patterns, it's going to have to be accessed internally from the west, and it'll be at one point restricted access from Highway 41. So I think that all plays into following street classification. I mean, it should be CCS on the highway. I mean, it's the highest street classification we have other than 990.
Right.
So,
Anything else to add? Nope. Number four, Commercial and high-density residential zoning is typically assigned along streets with higher road classifications. I believe you just covered that.
Just did.
Anything else to add? Okay, let's go to number 5. Limited or neighborhood commercial and lower density residential zoning is typically assigned for properties as they proceed further away from higher intensity urban activities, ensuring adequate land is available for future housing needs. Applicable?
It's not.
It is not.
No.
It is not.
Number 6, industrial zoning is typically assigned to properties with sufficient access, major transportation routes, and may be situated away from residential zoning.
Also not applicable.
Not applicable.
So that takes care of that. All right. Any other communication, thoughts, comments, concerns, pros, cons, anything they'd like to add?
I mean, it's infill. I mean,
Right.
it's exactly what it is. It's an infill annexation that had that property owner been willing to sell 10 years ago when that annexation really originally went through, it probably would have been part of that.
Right. Vicky Jo, does the idea of a special use permit make you feel better as far as multifamily?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Agreed,
Two is
agreed,
Nancy?
yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. At this point, I would look for a motion if someone would like to make one.
I'll move to recommend approval of Morris Annexation File 0013-2021, finding that's consistent with the comprehensive plan, and facts and finding and conclusions contained in the staff report with the requested zoning designation of CCS.
I second.
Okay. There's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Nope. Call for a vote.
Stephenson,
Yes.
Carey,
Yes.
Kimball,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Schlauer,
Yes.
Hampi.
Yes.
Okay. That is moved forward to council for consideration, which brings us up to the final public hearing of the evening. That is a review request for Stones Throw subdivision. We'll go ahead and open that up.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ethan Porter, one of the planners here with the city to present Stones Throw subdivision. The owner of this piece of property is Northern Lights Development LLC, and the applicant on their behalf is Lake City Engineering Incorporated. So they are requesting the action of approval to subdivide their 5.08 acres into 17 lots within the residential single-family R1 zone. Here you can see the property hashed in red. It's east of Greens Ferry Road, running north and south right there, adjacent to it. And so it's just south of Plummer Forest and north of Ponderosa Boulevard. The current land use at the site is single-family home. The water provider and the wastewater are both City of Post Falls, as this is an incorporated piece into the city. As you can see here, the zoning is R1 single-family residential, surrounded by R1 single-family residential. To the across the road from Greens Ferry, you have residential mobile home park, which is a subdivision platted on their own lots. And then you have that big gray piece on the north, which is Plummer Forest, located there. So majority of this is surrounded by single-family homes. The proposal tonight is kind of what you see probably through your staff report as well. This is what they're proposing. There's 17 lots. The larger one on the south there is an existing home that they will be keeping for retaining that home through the subdivision. So they will be developing and subdividing around it into those extra lots that you see. The widths and the lot sizes do meet the R1 standards. And as you see here, it is a cul-de-sac layout. Looking at the review criteria for subdivision, we look at the provisions for the water supply and the system being adequate and having the quantity and quality for this proposal. And as I mentioned, the City of Post Falls is the water purveyor and can and does have the capacity to supply water to this subdivision as proposed. Looking at the next review criteria deals with the sewage system and wastewater, and mentioned previously as well, the city is the purveyor for this, and they do have the capacity to maintain and have this subdivision be accommodated by sewer. Looking at the third review criteria, we look at the streets being consistent with the transportation element of the comprehensive plan. Within that, I did mention it's a cul-de-sac, so due to the existing developments surrounding that, the other subdivisions and development surrounding the site, a cul-de-sac proposed is acceptable and it won't have negative impacts on the transportation system as noted in the staff report tonight. So the layout is consistent as noted as well in the staff report with the city's transportation master plan. Looking at the fourth review criteria, we see that it's subdivision, the proposed subdivision, which may involve soil topographical conditions presenting hazards, have been identified, and the uses of these areas are compatible with such conditions. Currently, the site is heavily vegetated with trees, and it is currently above the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer. The fifth review criteria we see is dealing with the proposal for the subdivision being zoned and the proposed uses on that site conforming to other requirements found in this code. As I noted, staff has looked at this, been reviewed in the staff report. You can see that it does meet Title 17 subdivisions and Title 18 zoning for the R1 zoning district. Review criteria 6 is making sure that the community does not bear more than its fair share of costs through development. As mentioned previous tonight, we have impact fees through development. So after subdivision, when they come through for building permits and other permits on their properties, those properties then they will be offset through impact fees and cap fees to basically deal with multimodal services, parks, public safety, streets, city water, and wastewater services. The agencies that this was routed to are listed here. You can see of this list, the agencies that responded were police remaining neutral on this proposal, and then Kootenai County Fire and Rescue. They'll provide comments during the review process through subdivisions, and then Post Falls Highway District did not have a comment for this. So with that being said, I will entertain questions that you have for staff on this proposal.
Anyone have questions for staff?
No.
No?
Nope, I don't.
Okay. Ethan, thank you. We'll invite the applicant up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gordon Dobler with Lake City Engineering.
I was gonna say, something's not right.
I couldn't fool you, huh? Yeah, thank you. I am standing in for Lake City Engineering tonight at their request. He was double booked, so that happens. And the intent was, hopefully this isn't complicated, so, but I'm prepared to answer any questions. Again, fairly straightforward 5-acre subdivision. You've gone through the evaluation criteria, but just to touch on, the provisions. So we've got a standard city street being built, standard cul-de-sac. The lots are actually fairly big for an R1 zone. I think the average lot size is 10,000 square feet, which is a little bit bigger than the surrounding lots. There is an existing house they're gonna maintain. As Ethan said, it's on that one larger lot, and it will be hooked up to sewer when sewer's extended with the subdivision, and access will be changed to come off of the new street. Greens Ferry will be widened and improved. There's sewer in Greens Ferry extended onto the project. There's an existing 6-inch water in Greens Ferry that'll be extended. There is not an opportunity to loop it, so the water's gonna have to be dead end into the cul-de-sac. And staff's evaluated that. And it's not a problem. It'll be an 8-inch, so, which is the minimum required. Again, water, sewer's provided. The development pays for all this. They pay for the widening and infrastructure on Greens Ferry. There's just not a lot more to add.
Questions for applicant? Anything? No?
No, I don't.
Thank you, sir. Public comment. Those in favor?
None.
Those neutral?
We have one.
Okay. Remaining neutral, wishing to speak, Mr. Burns. Oh, Mr. Burns, you are already here.
I'm here. I'm here. Don't want to waste my 4 minutes, counting down. I live in the neighborhood. I think the plan's, it's a great plan for if you can't keep the trees forever and all the rest of it. I would say, I'd like to point out to the folks here that this does match the houses in the neighborhood. This is what one would expect to see on 5 acres in an R1 zone, as opposed to some plans that were approved down the road on Ponderosa, where they had 2,900 square foot lots and 4,200 square foot lots. Those don't belong in this neighborhood. And if the Plummer Forest Products ever comes to the market, this is what should be built there because it matches what's in the neighborhood. Not apartments, it's a single-family home neighborhood. I would ask that the developer do give some thought on the back 2 lots. If I lived in the houses that back up to it, because they all back up to it this way, the houses on the adjacent street run east-west as opposed to the lots at the back 2 running north-south. If they could move the houses as close to the lot line as allowed to give more of a buffer to that house, that would be nice to do. But I just wanted to thank the applicant, and I wanted to say that I'm on the impression, looking at this, that it can't become a PUD, that this is what we're going to get. And I just want to reassure myself that I'm looking at what I'm going to see when I drive by, see the houses going up. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Those in opposition?
We do have one.
Okay. In opposition, wishing to speak, Stephen, is it Godfrey? I'll have you come up front, state your name and address, and you have 4 minutes, sir.
My name is Stephen Godfrey, and I live at 398 South Forest Glen Boulevard. So I do live in that neighborhood, and I walk with my dogs past that lot weekly, if not a couple times a week. And I don't agree that it is in the same size lots proposed that are in my neighborhood. I know my lot currently that I live on is 1/3 of an acre. Those are right at 1/4 of an acre. So is it better than high density? Sure. One of the things I want to point out that I've heard throughout every presentation about everything you guys are doing is 2 words. I mentioned this in a city council meeting I was at before, as well as the word standard and adequate. I have 30 years in the United States Army. I know what a standard is, and I know what adequate is. And those aren't positive words, all right? Those are just words that equate to acceptable or something that we can sustain or manage, okay? And somebody was asking or mentioned something about assurances. And we can't get assurances from developers. We can't get assurances from planning division or anything like that. The people that are on the planning committee, you folks up here, you're the one that provides the city with the assurances, okay? Because we expect you to go ahead and protect and not allow things that shouldn't necessarily be or fit in. Widening of Green Ferry, negative impact. The comment was there's going to be no negative impact of the traffic. And I actually have to pull out onto Greens Ferry from Black Forest, which is the next street above that right there. So if these people want to go anywhere, they'll pull out that street and turn right on the Greens Ferry. So if I'm there at Black Forest wanting to turn on Greens Ferry, I'm not going to be able to necessarily get out. That will negatively impact me if I'm having to wait on that traffic to go past me that's coming out of there. Right now, that one lot that's wider, that's bigger, that has the house, that's one house. It's a 5-acre lot. That's what they have, that's what they own. and they want to divide that basically into 17. So the average is 2 cars per family. You can go down in almost every street in that neighborhood, there's more than 2 cars at each house. My house has 3 cars and a motorcycle, all right? So that's 17 times 2, that's 34 more cars that are going to be coming out of there daily, every day, more than twice a day. If they work, if they're retired, maybe not. I don't think that adequate is acceptable anymore. We got to look at long-term. Widening Greens Ferry, I don't know where they're going to widen it. Where they're going to widen it, 2 feet? They're going to get like the dirt that's right there because there's no curb, no sidewalk right there in that lot. They're going to widen it to there. How are they going to widen it? There's properties on the one side and there's properties on the other side. They're going to put a middle lane. They got enough property to put a middle lane, plus Centennial Trail is along that road. Greens Ferry is part of Centennial Trail. There's a bike lane there, all right? That Centennial Trail comes off of Ponderosa, which is below this, okay? And turns right onto Greens Ferry to go up past the railroad tracks and turns left. There's a bike lane. Were they going to eliminate the bike lane? All right, so we got to keep the bike lane in there. As well as we're going to widen the road, we're going to add a turn lane because now we're going to have cars that have to stop on Greens Ferry to turn into that cul-de-sac. There's a lot more consideration. I understand that you guys don't get to do site surveys. City Council doesn't do site surveys either. I understand that you guys are volunteers, but you're appointed. Okay, so you're volunteering, maybe not getting paid to do the job, but you're appointed by the mayor. I would love to know what each one of you actually do for a living. Okay, and I think the city or us citizens should know what you actually do. Because I also know, like the mayor works with Coeur d'Alene Bank, all right? So who's he appointing? Who has a job up here that's a realtor, that's in construction, that is anything to do with making money off of what happens here? Okay, at any of these places. There's 2 people that have stood out up here, all right, that seem to really get it and understand what progress should be, okay? So I hope you consider everything before you make decisions just to move forward. Site surveys need to be a part of what you guys do.
Thank you, sir. Applicant, anything else to add? No? Yes, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly understand the concerns. Just a few responses. How does Green Ferry get widened? Well, this project gives additional land so that Greens Ferry can be widened and install curb and sidewalk that would facilitate future pedestrian connectivity. That's how it gets widened. That's development paying their fair share as they move forward. I don't know what I think the standard section for Greens Ferry might have a 2-way left. Is it two lanes, 3 lanes? Something like that, but.
It's only 2 lanes, right?
Yeah, right now it's only 2 lanes, but as it's widened, I'm gonna guess that it would be wide enough to incorporate a left turn as the road continues to get widened. And really, that's the only way that a lot of the streets get improved is through development. So additional traffic, yeah, nobody wants to see one more car on their street, but the projects that proposed fits well within the zoning parameters of the R1. Like I said, the lots are substantially larger than the minimum provided to the R1. So.
Anything for applicant?
No.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any other questions, clarification, comments that we need to address? Nope. Okay, let's jump into criteria for this last piece. Number 1, definite provisions have been made for water supply systems that is adequate terms of quality and quantity for this type of subdivision purpose. I feel like we've been through this a few times. It seems that staff does a good job communicating that. Any additional thoughts?
I think that's covered well in a staff report.
Okay. Number 2, adequate provisions have been made for public sewage systems and that the existing municipal system can accommodate the proposed sewer flows. Again, falls in line with number 2, or number 1 was discussed.
Yeah, that provisions have been made and are discussed in the staff report.
Okay. Number 3, proposed streets are consistent with the transportation element of the comprehensive plan. There were some concerns with streets. Anything to address there?
I think the widening of Greens Ferry meets the transportation master plan policies.
Okay. Anything else to add? No? Okay, number 4. All areas of the proposed subdivision which may involve soil or topographical conditions presented hazards have been identified, and that the proposed use of these areas are compatible with such conditions. Nothing was brought forward, nothing additional was said. Anyone? No? Number 5, the areas proposed for subdivisions is zoned for the purpose and the uses conforms with the other requirements found in this code.
As proposed, it exceeds the requirements found in the zoning code.
Okay? Anything else? No? Number 6, the developer has made adequate plans to ensure that the community will bear no more than its fair share of the cost of providing services by paying fees, furnishing land, or providing other mitigating measures of off-site impacts to streets, parks, and other public facilities within the community. It is the expectation that in most cases, off-site mitigation will be dealt with through the obligation to pay development impact fees. I think we've discussed this. It's been noted, but anything else to add?
I don't think there's any extraordinary impacts that won't be dealt with through mitigation, through impact fees.
Okay. You guys, everyone, nothing else? Okay. Any other thoughts, concerns, comments, notes?
Just had one more comment.
Okay.
My hope, and maybe Mr. Dobler can pass this along, is there's lots of trees there. Try to keep as many as possible. But the development fits.
Okay. Duly noted. Anything else?
I agree. It's appropriate for that area, I think.
Okay. Well, at this point, I would look for a motion.
Okay, I will. I move to recommend approval of Stone Throw Subdivision SUBD 0006 2022, finding that it is consistent with the comprehensive plan and adopting findings and conclusions and conditions 1 through 10 as contained in the staff report with the recommended zoning designation of R1.
So, just to correct, it's a subdivision motion. Your motion is more related to a zoning recommendation. So it's zoned R1, so it's a,
Okay.
you'd be making the recommendation, finding that it meets the approval criteria.
That it meets the approval criteria
For a subdivision.
for a subdivision.
In an R1 zone.
Vicky,
Yeah,
are
and
you
it-
saying
and
what Field said?
I'm sorry, and it's an actual approval rather than
not
a
a-
recommendation.
Okay.
You guys are
I
making the
move to
decision.
approve Stone Throw Subdivision SUBD 0006 2022. I'm sorry, then. It's not on my, that's.
I got you here. Give me a second.
Go on, Ray.
I know, I knew it. Okay, there we go. I knew I had it here somewhere. Thank you. Cheat sheet. Finding that it meets approval criteria in the Post Falls Municipal Code as outlined in our deliberation, subject to conditions 1 through 10 contained in the staff report, and direct staff to prepare a written reasoned decision.
I
Sorry-
second.
Sorry, audience.
Okay, there's been a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call for a vote.
Amby,
Yes.
Schlauer,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Kimball,
Yes.
Carey,
Yes.
Stephenson.
Yes.
Okay, that concludes public hearings for this evening. It leads us to the next item on this evening's agenda, and that is administrative and staff reports.
None.
I would like to make a quick comment. One of the comments made tonight regarding occupations of commissioners. You guys also serve as our Development Impact Fee Advisory Committee, which requires that at least 2 of you are members who are active in the business of development, building, and real estate. So part of the state code contemplates a composition that is well-balanced. So just wanted to point that out.
Okay?
Are you saying we're well balanced?
I think so.
I don't
Thank
know
you.
that that's what he said.
Thank
I didn't
you.
say you were well-balanced.
Commission comments. Anything for the good of the order?
I have a question and a comment. John, going back to the future land use, and maybe you talked about this, business/commercial versus commercial. What's the big difference there?
The big difference is the commercial slant is really meant for just pure commercial. It doesn't have the flexibility for some of the other residential uses or maybe industrial uses like business commercial would potentially entertain. So the business commercial is more of a flexed future land use designation, and then the commercial just hones it in with the commercial intent, more or less.
And then my comment here, and this is just a comment and my thought, you know, the city keeps growing and growing, but we have, I believe this is in the comp plan, it says goal 3, keep the small town atmosphere scale. You know, at some point, I think we need to look at that. It's like, what's small town, you know? Some people would say this is not a small town anymore. Just a comment, just saying at some point, we probably need to look at that.
I agree.
And I think that's a hard piece to address because
Definitely.
It is.
how
Yes.
exactly does that look? Could it be pockets of small town feel? I mean, some of the things that we've seen
Yeah.
with some of the development, it's like, oh, it's got very small town feel as far as walkability and some of those things, but it is definitely an ongoing issue. Absolutely.
So I had one comment that I wanted to make. So as most everyone here knows, I'm a civil engineer and I work in land development. So as it was alluded to tonight that there were, you know, that some of us benefit or might benefit from the decisions we make here tonight. And we're very conscientious about making sure that we recuse ourselves if there is any impropriety or any sort of a conflict of interest. But not necessarily related to that is that there seems to be a prevailing attitude where, and maybe it's just we hear it from the community because we get a lot of the negative feedback, where developers are making all the money and the builders are making all the money. I asked a builder and a developer the other day to provide me a list of the businesses and suppliers that they use. And in order for one house to get built on an empty lot, they use 50 different local businesses. And in order for a subdivision to get built, there's more than 50 different other businesses that are local that all benefit. So it's a long-reaching number of businesses and people and families in our community that are all impacted by land development and a house being built. And I think a lot of that goes unnoticed and unappreciated because those people are all working and they're not showing up to these public hearings. But I think it's important to recognize them and those businesses. And that's all I got to say.
I think you could say within 2 degrees of separation, everybody employed, everyone here is employed in this same industry, one way or another indirectly. And maybe a few people that are, you know, perhaps work in a silver mine, maybe wouldn't, but pretty much everybody else, directly or indirectly, in our area, is tied to construction.
Well, and I would just say I appreciate each and every one of you because of your level of professionalism. Ray, you're right. It seems like when things don't go someone's way, it's quick to accuse, point fingers, maybe even fabricate. But I appreciate the fact that when we come here, regardless of day or attitude or anything else, we can set everything aside and we can stick to the criteria and the rules that are laid forth that we are supposed to follow. And we can take emotion and we can take everything else out of it and simply do our job. So I appreciate you guys. I know you have taken immense amount of flack, and for that I apologize, but thank you for doing your job.
Apology accepted.
Apology accepted.
On that note, anything else for the good of the order?
Oh.
None?
Thank you for the licorice.
Yes, thank you for the licorice.
Yeah.
I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.